In this episode, we are joined by Utkarsh Narang to explore the courage paradox. We will uncover how fear can ignite bold decision making, drive innovation, and ultimately shape more resilient and effective leaders. Let me tell you a little bit more about Utkarsh. Utkarsh is a learning consultant, executive coach, and facilitator based in Melbourne, Australia. He has this passion for understanding human behavior and using his diverse experience in building programs for organizations across the globe. And something that is quite personal is that I got super inspired by one of his TED Talks that he has done recently. Utkarsh, it is a pleasure to have you. And maybe just to start, uh, I, I want you to share the essence of your TED Talk because for me, I felt it quite close to my personal story. It is a little bit of your personal stories about how fears can ignite bold decision making in our personal lives.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ivan, for having me here. Looking forward to our conversation. And when this opportunity of giving the TED Talk, like it came across, my first reaction was, let me talk about my career change, the challenge that my wife and I took of moving with two kids halfway across the world from India to now Melbourne, Australia. And we are here only like it's been 18 months in this new country. So we're still just starting to call this home, I would say. And all this while I was thinking of crafting that story for the TEDx stage, I was thinking that it was courage that was driving me. I was so courageous. I was living my values and this and that, and I was like in that hero posture, right, with my hands on my waist and starting with my chest wide open. And then what I do, Ivan, is that whenever I have to give something that's the magnitude of which is higher, I reach out to a core group that I have of my mentors, of dear friends, and I asked all of them that this is what I'm thinking of speaking about. That's the idea. What do you all think? And out of those 10 people, 8 were like, Utkarsh, what a brilliant idea. Yes, courage is spoken about in the world, but we need more of courage because we're living in times where courage is slowly moving away from the human mind. And then one of them said, but Utkarsh, all this while, was courage the innate emotion or were you driven by fear? And I was like, in my tracks. What kind of a question is that? How do I answer that question? But as I started to think about it more deeply, Ivan, what came about was that for the human mind and human body and human psychology, whatever you want to use the term, fear is something that's very innate to all of us. We all fear uncertainty. We all fear failure. We all fear being the imposter and all of that. And as I started to reflect on every leap and bound and movement that I had in my life, I realized that, oh, I was fearful of that. And that's why I moved. I was fearful of that. And that's why it changed. And then what emerged for me was that maybe it's fear that drives all of us, and we give it a lot of negative connotation, that if I have fear of failure, then I'll not succeed or I'll not move forward. But fear is something that's actually helping us, and it's a motivator to help us take the next step. So that's how it emerged, Ivan. And it's a very personal story, the TEDx talk. So folks who want to type out on YouTube the name, I think they'll find the TEDx talk.
Absolutely. You know, when you were discussing, I'm thinking that yes, fear, which is one of the most basic instincts that we have in our human brain, because we are driven either by pleasure, instant pleasure, or fear, and that's what influences a lot of our decision making, because it's made to protect us. So it is very natural to take decisions based on fear. But now the jump that you are making, and what I find quite fascinating is that, and somehow in the TED talk you mentioned that I have learned to use fear to drive me towards courage, and that's something quite important because usually fear is what makes us stay in the current position instead of helping us to move forward. Can you
Yeah,
explain a little bit more this courage paradox, and
absolutely.
especially in the context of leadership, where there is politics that are driven by fear, because politics is what is going to protect us, to help us survive in the organization.
Yeah.
Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more, Utkarsh.
Absolutely. No, I think this quote is attributed to Nelson Mandela, where he once said, Ivan, that it's not fear is not the absence of courage is not the absence of fear, but it is your ability to act despite of the fear. And so I
Mhm.
think that is something that I really took to heart, because if you look at this, and I'll give a few examples from my life, because then that it becomes more relatable. When I moved so I used to be a physical therapist many years ago, 2 decades ago, it seems. When I moved from that life to becoming a videographer and editor, the first day I stepped into that corporate world, my heart sank, because every day I would just tell myself, Utkarsh, you're an imposter here. So there was this fear of failure that was gripping me all the time, where it felt that this fear is going to take over me and it'll not let me act, because that's how we've grown with it, right? Because we think that the fear is to paralyze us.
Mm.
But what we need to reframe here, Ivan, is that it's not the fear as the emotion itself, it's the intensity of the emotion that paralyzes us. And so if I'm feeling it a very intense emotion of fear, then I'll not move forward. But if
Mm.
I'm aware of the fear, I'm aware of how much of is the intensity, I'm aware why am I fearful here, then that'll allow me to actually take the next step, that'll allow me to act despite of the fear that I have. So I think that's what played out in my case. Now as I coach people, Iman, I see that play so many times. The fear of failure allows them to not move forward in a project. It stops them from being innovative, and they will think about it 100,000 times, because they'll feel, what if I fail? But the question then you need to ask yourself is, if you don't do something about it, then you've failed already, and it's just a quick switch of button. And that to me is the courage paradox, that you will have fear. It's a very natural emotion, it's trying to protect you. It's like getting on this podcast. What will Ivan ask me? What if I screw up? What if I don't say an answer that the people in the audience, they don't even find it valuable, and 6 minutes into it they feel like, what the hell, I'm not going to talk to Utkarsh. That fear walks in, but I have to act despite of it, because action is what's in my control, Ivan.
Now, in the middle of this turmoil of action that happens in the corporate world,
Mhm.
you mentioned, so we need to be able to identify and measure this intensity of the fear.
Yeah.
How can we actually do it? I mean, when we are with the rush of adrenaline,
Mhm.
we just follow the flow, and the flow, the natural flow for humans, is to comply with the fear and do the action based on that fear. So how
Yeah.
is there like some techniques so that leaders especially can use in order to be more mindful? And here I'm giving you the hint. More
Yeah,
mindful.
I got the hint. I got the hint. I mean, it's until and unless you do it 100,000 times, it's going to sound really complex. But once someone learns this art of being mindful, Ivan, and thank you for the hint, I think it becomes very easy. See, what I'll say is that these are these patterns that get formed into our brain, that we will act based on this. Again, I'll go back to childhood. And if any of our listeners are Indians, and Ivan shared with me that he's in Switzerland right now, which is where Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge was filmed. And so it's a very famous location for us Indians. My first question to Ivan was, what would it take for me to be in Switzerland? But the thing is that, as if you're a kid growing up in India specifically, and other countries are also in the same pattern, you're always told that you cannot fail. You're always told that you have to succeed at everything. But if we reflect on that, that just shifts the identity of the psychology of the person, because they're becoming fearful of that failure. And I think that's a big problem that we need to kind of move away from. The best way to do that, Ivan, is that we need to unlearn this behavior. We need to really pause ourselves in our tracks and ask, like, what am I doing right now? Is what I'm doing the right thing for me to do? And as you ask yourself that question, I'm pretty sure that 90 out of 100 times you'll realize that this is not the right intensity of the emotion that I'm. So being mindful. But the problem, Ivan, is that it takes a lot of practice.
Mm.
It's like it's like look at Usain Bolt running 100-meter, right? He'll do it in like 9 seconds. And here I am watching the Olympics on the screen, and I'm like, 9 seconds? I cannot even like get up from the ground in 9 seconds. And you're completing like 100 meters in 9 seconds. What the hell is wrong with you, man? But he did practice for years and years and years to be able to do that 100-meter right. So you as leaders, whoever is listening to us, Ivan, what is stopping us from becoming a better version of ourselves? What is stopping us from becoming a better leader, so to say? And the best way to do that, as Ivan said, is mindful. And one technique that I'll give you, you and I, both of us right now, are respirating, Ivan.
Mm.
We're taking oxygen in, leaving carbon dioxide out. I'm being scientific here. That's the level of science that I know. But we're respirating. I think what's important is for us to understand that when do we breathe, and when you really focus on your breath, when you really slow it down, that's when you become mindful, and that's what's going to allow you to gauge your fear and the intensity of it.
Absolutely. I'm totally with you. So just behind the story is not the oxygen, is not the breathing itself, but is the capacity that we have in our brain to wake up the rational side of our brain and let the emotional side, that is the one that is driven by fear and pleasure, to tone down so that you have somebody doing the auditing.
Yeah,
The auditing, that means
love
that you
that.
can have a number. And you can only do it if you are in a state of focus. And the state of focus is going to wake up this part of the brain that is going to be auditing. You said something that is quite powerful, but gosh, I wish that I knew it when I started my career. So this area where we are fearful of failing is very often dictated by society, our parents, sometimes even us as parents, we
Correct.
do that by giving this routine of people where, watch out, don't try it, you are not ready. And this has becomes in our brain like a law, dictated law written in stone in our
Yeah.
brain, like it's a rule in order to survive. So it's obvious that it takes time, that you cannot just take a pen and a notebook just to write what makes you, what are your fears, if they are true or not. That is not enough. It requires to create like a highway inside of your brain. So you need repetition in order to create a reflex that comes automatically, that wakes up the rational part of your brain to basically audit where you are. So
Yeah.
repetition in a small chunks is not something that you need a retreat in the middle of India to practice that. You can practice it as short as the breathing exercise that Utkarsh has mentioned. It takes
Yeah.
maybe 2 minutes every day to do it
Yeah.
in order to start doing it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, and create a new neural pathway so that it becomes a routine. Because
Correct.
and then when you really need it, it's going to come automatically. Otherwise, it cannot just in one shot.
I 100% agree with all of that, Ivan. See, the question is, life's a challenge, right? Life's not going to get easier for any one of us, whether we are a billionaire, a millionaire, or we have 100,000 rupees in the bank or whatever, right? Or whatever conditions we're in, whether we have a great relationship or not, whether we have good health or not, life's still going to be a challenge. And we got to face this challenge head on. There's no other option. I mean, I have not understood any other option. If people have, they should just drop me an email. I'd love to have that conversation. But when you are going through this challenge, what's stopping you from being more aware of your emotions? What's stopping you from being a better version? The question that I'm asking is that why can't we work on ourselves first before we go out there and work on the world? That's one. Second, as you spoke about failure at the start of it, Ivan, imagine I end up living 100 years, right? If I failed in a grade 12 exam about 20 years ago, or if I failed in my business at age 35, or if I succeeded at age 70, who the fuck really cares?
Yeah.
It's 100 years. You live it by your terms, live it. And I'm not saying go out and start swearing at people or start killing people or start doing wrong things. You should not. But you've got to live it fully. That's one. And you have to be of service to yourself and to the world. I think that to me then is a state of bliss. And these failures, these mistakes that you make, no one's going to remember them. We remember them in our heart and head. No one's going to remember them at all.
Mm. It looks like an advertising quote, live on your own terms and all that stuff. But truly, if we think about the purpose of human beings and what we aspire when we are completely uh, feel fulfilled, is when
Hmm.
we reach this state where we can take certain decisions. We become a little bit more aware, where it's almost transcendental. So in reality, even though in different cultures we associate transcendence to religion,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, is the aspect of picking up a purpose in life,
Yeah.
something that is going to, and that if we are working towards that purpose, we are going to feel fulfilled. But before you find this purpose, you need to work on self-awareness. You cannot, it's not the same purpose for Utkarsh or Ivan, uh, for
Yeah.
sure. So it
100%.
takes time.
It does. It does. And it's very easy. We've started to again, the noise from the outside, Ivan, is so strong that even our purpose gets influenced by that noise. And I think that's also where the self-awareness comes in. That are you really self-aware that you want to choose a purpose that's authentic and that's true to you? Or you're trying to see like, oh, that person on LinkedIn, that person on Instagram, that influencer on Facebook, I love that work. I want to be like them. If you're going to live your life based on who you see on the outside, then it's not going to be a beautiful journey, and it's going to be hard for you. And I'm not saying it from a place of uh, arrogance. I'm saying it from a place of love, that once you find that journey within yourself, life actually transcendental and bliss are the two words that I use, Ivan.
Please, I like that word. Um, you have got a lot of experience with coaching leaders, and that makes me ask you that specific question. Do you see a type of fear that is more conducive to courageous leadership? Do you see something that stays like most of leaders are having in a day-to-day basis? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I think there are multiple kinds of fears that start to emerge in us as a leader. When you're leading a, say, a startup or a large corporation, whatever be the state, you will be fearful of the failures. You will be fearful of going in the wrong direction. You will be fearful of maybe hiring a wrong person, maybe firing a wrong person. You will be fearful of growth for the company. There'll be so many different things that you can have the fear of. But the problem is that the fear actually is not limiting you. It's trying to protect you from a new state, Ivan. Once you learn to really cross that barrier, that you feel like this fear is protecting me, but if I cross this barrier, I'm going to grow as a person. I'm going to grow in my business. I'm going to grow in my life. And so, is this worth pushing forward? I think once you ask that question to yourself, that's when you start to realize that yes, this fear is limiting me, but if I embrace it, I can actually reach my full potential. And growth, again, coming back to that same point, that growth is a little challenging. Growth is a little hard. I mean, I sometimes give this example, Ivan. I have two boys who are now turning to be 14 and 10. When they were young and born, like little infants, 8, 9 months year old, when they started to walk, they would fall 100,000 times before they really could grip their feet on the ground and walk. Never did I tell them, or my wife, we tell them, you have fell so many times, you're falling again and again, you're not capable of walking. Why don't you give up on walking? If we
Hmm.
would have to said that, then they would not have walked, they would not have learned to run, to do all of the beautiful things that they do. And so in the corporates also, we got to bring that same energy. And I'm not saying that the possibility of failing in corporates is much higher. I'm not saying that. If you make one mistake and you fail or you fall, that's okay, but learn from that mistake and grow as a person so that you get better the next time. If you keep repeating the same mistake and you keep making the same error, saying, oh, it's okay to fail, it's okay to fall, my fear of failing is gone down now, that does not work. You have to become aware of how you're learning and growing so that you get better with each impact that you, each time you cross this fear barrier, so to say.
Hmm. I don't know. You brought some memories
Uh-huh.
back in my times or in corporate, where basically certain decisions that I took and today I regret deeply were driven by fear, and this fear comes from the misalignment within what I thought it was the good thing to do,
Yeah.
and the punishment if I failed to do this a change. Um, and and I think I see it repetitively in people, that because the culture of the organization is not ready, uh, big changes that have bad outcomes are punished.
Yeah.
So you get humiliated, your promotion are stalled. So what would you advise to Ivan back then,
Hmm.
telling you, Utkarsh, if I do this, even though I feel it deeply, I'm going to be punished because it's the right thing to do, but still the company would not appreciate it.
Yeah. It's a tough question, Ivan, because there are a lot of variables for that young Ivan. Maybe that was his first job and he did not want to move away from that job. Maybe it was a time where Ivan really needed that job, and it was a recession or something else that he was going through. But my ask always of Ivan and others who are listening is that if you're in a place where the culture does not support your growth, or the culture feels that the innovative idea that you've come up with, or the big project that you're working on, which might lead to failure, is
Mhm.
not the right thing to do, and you don't relate to that culture, the values that you have as a human being and the values of that culture, that company, do not match, then it's time to move on. It is extremely important for you to move forward from that organization and not be there. That's one. The second thing you can think about is, what can I do? Who can I talk to? Who can I influence to shift the culture of this organization? Because that responsibility also I would want to take as young Ivan. So that's the second thing. The third is, if nothing works, then I mean, for the time being, it might be okay to just go through that failure, go through that punishment, but you should not be idly working there. So that's my kind of I see two options, Ivan. Either change what you're seeing, or
Mhm.
change yourself away from the position that you're in. There's no other midway that you can find on these occasions. Does that answer your question? Does that help the young Ivan?
Maybe he will be receptive back then. Uh, but I was thinking that the young Ivan took a long time to remove the second level of fear, which is the financial equilibrium that the Ivan had reached.
Yeah.
So if I have to move out of the context that is
Yeah.
polluting my mind, that makes me unhappy, where I don't feel fulfilled, I will have to sacrifice, take the leap. And young Ivan took years to do that leap.
Yeah.
And he needed even a big mental break in order to be able to do that leap.
Yeah.
Now, young Ivan, the story of young Ivan is not only Ivan. There is plenty of Ivans in the world with this fear of moving out of this financial stability. But the crazy thing is that I now can share is that once you do that leap, and when you are moved by a purpose, all these skills that you had put down because it wasn't worthwhile, they come back.
Yeah.
And suddenly you start regaining your financial stability. And I guess, Utkarsh, maybe something similar also, all these big changes that you did, moving from a physiotherapist to media creator,
Yeah.
moving to the area of coaching, that were big leaps that needed a lot of cojones in order to be done. And at the end, because we are moved by a fire when we are doing something on our own, we find solution. Is that something similar?
100% agree with that, Ivan. And see, the point is, how I see life is that life's too short in a way, and still the longest thing that you and I will do, because we'll hopefully live 100 years. But what if I die today, and if I'm not fully satisfied with the work that I'm doing, the people I'm around, then something needs to change, because it's not worth it to stay in that same place. It's not worth it to 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 take ownership of a toxic culture. It's not worth it to let your mental health be compromised because of it. And I know that the financial implications are very extremely important. I'll not even use the word very, extremely important, because you need to pay the bills. I cannot say that, oh, I have so much purpose, why are you charging for gas? Let me fill my tank full, because I do a very purposeful job. No one's going to agree to that. They're going to be like, good gosh, you've gone mad, you should go to the asylum or something. And so the challenge is that, how do you find that balance for yourself? Young Utkarsh 20 years ago, since we're talking about young Ivan and young Utkarsh, about 15 years ago, when he was a physical therapist, he was wanting to touch more lives than what he was doing in that moment. I had 3 private practices, 3 clinics back home in Delhi, India, Ivan. Very well paying, purposeful work. I was helping people live better lives. What more could I have asked for? But this dissatisfaction was that how would I touch lives globally? How do I help someone in New York? How do I help someone in Australia? And that kind of dissatisfaction started to make me feel like I'm not doing the right thing right now with my life. And so instead of quitting my practice immediately, I started to network. Let me see what's possible in the world. I networked for a year before I got my first opportunity, one. And in that first opportunity, I met a professor who was at Columbia Business School. My sister was working with them at that time, and so she said, "Why don't you come and meet this professor? He's in Delhi." I'm like, "Okay, let's see what happens." And I did not know, but I went there owning the place, owning the space, saying that if they don't hire me, it's going to be a mistake on them. And so they asked me, Utkarsh, you're a physical therapist. What would you do? I'm like, you make me do anything. Give me 3 months and I'll prove my worth. And they're like, okay, fair enough. We'll give you 3 months. You go through a probation period. And that was a startup. 2 employees. I was the third one. So it was low risk for them too. And they had credibility from my sister that, oh, my brother is a good guy. You should hire him. And so they hired me, but within those 3 months, I proved my worth to then be there for 8 years and year after year get a raise, get multiple promotions to, again, by the time I left that company, I was, again, very highly paid, very purposeful, very thoughtful. So network, put in the action. I tell people, Ivan, we have 168 hours in a week. Watching Netflix is not going to pay your bills. Watching Instagram and scrolling through, not going to pay your bills. You have to really do something to pay your bills. And so if you work for 40 hours, 45 hours, 50 hours, go ahead and work 70 hours. You still have out of the week 100 hours left for yourself. And I'm doing complicated maths. We might put some graphics on the screen, but it's going to be hard. So 168 minus 70, we're left with 100 hours. You sleep, you eat, you drink, you have relationships, whatever you want to do. You still will be left with about 20, 25 hours to do something to build on your dream. Now, who's going to stop you except you? And that's what you got to do and move yourself, move beyond the fear and do something about it.
Small parenthesis, you're counting of hours. So when we are doing something that we enjoy, doesn't count in the same way as work. That entrepreneurs, we know that's that story. So we can make more hours than in the office because it's ours. It is our baby. It's like taking care of your child. So it doesn't count in your mind. It goes quick. It goes fast. There is excitement. Even after working, you don't feel like, oh my God.
What the hell? I agree with that. I agree with that emotion.
Then there is another thought that crossed my mind when you were explaining this story of taking the time to ask the right questions regarding what if I don't do this. You made me think about another good TED Talk from Tim Ferriss, where he was talking about instead of fixing goals in your life, trying to map out what are your biggest fears so that you can use it as a fuel to do the things that you must do. What are you going to miss in 10 years, in 20 years, if you don't do one action that you're fearful to do now? I love that TED Talk, man. Absolutely. It was amazing.
Yeah. Life's very simple, Ivan. We have complicated it extremely without much reasons. I think the simplicity is to really and this is not rocket science. This is not going to help you build a rocket to take you to Mars or to even the moon. You need to build those small habits. You need to get the small actions and stack them up. And you got to show up and you got to show up and you got to learn and you got to grow and you got to get feedback. I see tremendous fear of feedback, Ivan. I think that needs to go away too, because feedback is a gift. When I used to get feedback in my work environment and it was some harsh feedback because the stakes were high, I used to feel like this person whose coaching is about $1,500 an hour is giving me feedback. How lucky am I? And I would laugh in my head that, oh, I can learn this. And so to be and go there and do something about it do something about it.
Talking about feedback, is there a way that leaders can create this culture of where people feel safe to acknowledge fear and use it constructively? Is there a way that they can use it using feedback on other means? What is the tip that you would give to a leader about it?
Oh, absolutely. I love this topic. You're taking me to my sweet spot, Ivan. I think, and I run a lot of workshops to help organizations, small and large, to make this happen. So the first and foremost is, Ivan, that you got to start to act in a growth mindset way. And you got to train your people to have that growth mindset. Because what that really shows is that I'm not fixed and I'm not reached my highest yet. There's room for improvement always. And not even the sky can be my limit, and I can keep growing. So this idea of infinite growth in a more realistic way is what I want. Like, to imagine myself in the next, say, 1 year, be running 100 meter at Usain Bolt's speed is unreasonable. And there's something wrong with me. Am I high on drugs or something like that? But to say that, yes, I can maybe run a 42-kilometer marathon within the next 1 year if I run for that. Yes, that's growth mindset, and that's possible. So I think first tip is to imbibe a growth mindset in yourself and your people. Very quick to do. And the second thing is create that space for vulnerability. Create that space for safety, that if someone's coming and talking to you about something, they don't have to feel fear. They feel that they're taken care of. They feel love instead. And I know leadership and love do not go together. Love is more 21st century romantic kind of love that we speak about. But love in the workplace is really important, because you got to be vulnerable to them, that you share your details, that, oh, this is how I'm feeling right now. Talk about the feelings, create that safety, create that safe space for them, where your people start to feel that I can come and seek feedback. And when feedback is given to me, that does not mean that I'm not doing things right. That means I can do them better. And that's what's going to help change the culture.
I love this integration of the growth mindset. Uh, and I have the feeling that sometimes leaders, they forget that people, human beings, we always think in terms of goals. And maybe one of the key tasks of a leader is to help them to do this 1% more that will help them go towards that goal, because people change. Maybe the goal is going to change, but I have already progressed. I was able to do, instead of 9 seconds in 100 meters, I was able to do my 45 seconds in 100 meters, and that is
Beautiful.
already a progress from
Yeah.
where I am today. Utkarsh, yes, you have guessed it. I don't do sports that much.
No, but 45 seconds is pretty good. I'm going to check myself tomorrow. I think I can beat you then.
Send me a message, please.
Yes, I'll do that.
So to channel, in fact, and to help them create this mental process of saying, yes, you have a goal. Let's start with the next action that will help you be 1% more, 1% closer to you, to that ultimate goal.
Yeah.
We have been discussing about this story of having courage to use fear as a fuel for a leadership, but I guess that there is some limitations in the model. So
Mm.
sometimes we leaders may go beyond and take too much actions that are reckless or impulsive because of this mantra. Is there a way to help leaders to be a little bit more calculated and strategic in the use of on the use of this approach?
Yeah. I think that, again, what we're should not be taken as black and white. I think the idea here is one that you got to move ahead of your fear. You got to embrace that fear and say that fear, let's come walk together and see what the possibilities are in the world, in our business, wherever you are. I think we also need to make sure that we look at the data. We look at past experiences. We look at companies who have done similar work in the industries that we are. We have a group of common friends, or an inner circle who we can reach out to and say what's happening. We have a board that we can trust. We have direct reports who are like really amazing in supporting us on our decision making skills. All of that needs to come together to allow leaders to take the right decisions. And it's a very fine balance. And I use this word in my TED talk as well, Ivan, that we're all funambulist. And the word is still a tongue twister for me, but what it means is that we're all tightrope walkers. little bit left and right, and we might fall from our tightrope, and it's going to wobble. There's no other way about walking a tightrope. And as we walk on that, some days we'll be very risk averse, and some days we'll be very risk takers. Some days we'll be emerging away from the fear and be courageous, and someday we'll not be so much so. Someday we'll need a lot of help, and some days we'll go out and kill it. And
Mm.
that's the journey of life. There's no like carrot at the end of the stick that you're chasing. It's just you keep taking these steps on your journey, on your path, on your tightrope, whatever you might want to call it, and have that confidence, have that support system around you that can help you take the right decisions. I think that's what I'll add.
Mm. So it's almost like we always need to have an external perspective in order to know, because us alone, it's very difficult to know where did we go, when did we go too far. So it's always good, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a coach. It can be somebody who cares about you, but who's going to tell you the honest truth.
Yeah,
Sometimes wives don't do that. They are
yeah,
more to the caring.
absolutely. And yeah, it could be a mentor, it could be an advisor, it could be maybe a YouTube video that you watch really helps you move forward. So find whatever it takes, sit with yourself. I think the ultimate decision as a leader has to come from you in a way, and that's the responsibility that you've taken. So collect all the data, but make a decision that you feel in the moment is the right one. And you'll only know in retrospect. There's no way to, as Steve Jobs said in his famous Stanford keynote, there's no way to connect the dots forwards. You will only be able to connect the dots backwards. And you can say the in the moment, the worst thing that could happen to Steve Jobs was that Scully came in and he was thrown out of his own company. But look what that did for Apple, because he went to Next, he came back, we got Pixar and Next in the world. So many amazing movies got formed, and then Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and I'm a fan for the products that Apple has created. So the price, not so much of the price tag, but of the products.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I am still a fan, but I prefer the products that they developed 10 years ago. The new
Yeah,
ones,
I
less.
agree with that. I'm happy with my iPhone 13. I don't need the 16 or the 17 or whatever is coming right now.
um, Everybody has heroes. I mean, probably you have already mentioned a little bit like an example of like Steve Jobs in terms of leaders who effectively use fears to fuel their courage and make bold decisions. Do you have other heroes, either personal or heroes that in leadership that have done the thing correctly?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I read about a lot about leaders and people who've led companies, whether that's Jack Ma or Howard Schultz or Sundar Pichai or Satya Nadella from Microsoft or Indra Nui or Leena Nair. So many leaders, and there are many. But part of me feels like you just need to extract beautiful things from each one to then create your own leadership journey, because your brand is very unique to who you are, and it's really hard to really say that, oh, I want to be a leader like that or not. So I'm learning from a lot, imbibing them, and then being my own leader. I don't know if that's right or wrong. Only time can tell. And all I ultimately care about, Ivan, is that the life that I live is fulfilled, and there's no regret in the life that I lived. And I think if that is something that I can do, and I've been able to live by my 5 values that I have, then I think that's a life well lived, and I'll be happy with it.
Hmm. Um, just to understand, when you are saying your 5 values, you are talking about your personal 5 values, the things that you picked, or
Yeah.
is it like a framework?
No, so this is something that like I recommend to everyone who's listening right now to really work and hone in on your 5 values. What are the values that drive you in life? And for me, Ivan, my 5 values, whether personal or professional, are discipline, excellence, freedom, growth, and love.
Mm,
And I'm present here to you with a lot of love and care, and my energy and my passion tries to show that here, because that's important to me. uh, we were to start at 4:30 p.m. my time. I was here 4:29 because I don't want to be late for Ivan because he's waiting. And so to me, discipline is extremely important. So all of these values, I think, if I wake up in the morning aware of the values, and I end my day saying that, oh, I lived my 5 values, then I live and I sleep a peaceful man. And there's this one quote from Gandhi that really resonates. He used to say that When I sleep at night, I die, and then I'm waking up again, I'm born again. And to me, that just simplifies life in so many beautiful ways. And so I think that to me becomes my philosophy, and that those five values are what's kind of guiding me.
Mm. What would be the tip if we say that the five having some identifying your personal values
Mm-hmm.
is something that is quite essential, and we say that in order to measure to be able to weight our fears, we need to have a moment of self-awareness. And we also mentioned the fact that mindfulness as a detector of our emotions, the intensity of our emotions was super important. How can a person, let's say if I'm alone, I'm a leader, identify these values? And the reason why I'm asking is because there is a trick question. When you are alone, you mix your values with the outcome. Like, I want to be successful. That's
Yeah.
not a freaking value.
Not at
That
all.
could be an outcome of your,
Yes.
but a lot of people has this tendency to mix outcomes with values. How would
Yeah.
you go about it to help someone uh, to identify his personal values?
Yeah, I think after you've listened to this conversation, so now you know my values. I think what the ask here is that go within yourself to check with yourself. What are some really guiding principles that guide my life? Yes, I want to be successful. Yes, I want to have happy relationships. But what's at the core of that? So just go a little bit deeper, sit with yourself to find out those values. That's one thought. Find yourself a coach. I think that always works. Find yourself a coach. Ivan and I are available, but if you want, find any coach who can do some values work for you and go through that journey with them where they challenge you. And then third, very practical thing that I can say, Ivan, is if I were to say, if whoever is listening, imagine 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, there comes a day when it's your last day on the planet and you're going to leave this planet, you're dead, and you're, if you're an Indian Hindu, you're lying on the woods. If you're Christian, you're about to be put into your coffin, exactly, and you're put into that grave. In that moment, you have certain level of awareness left. If
Mm,
in that moment you were to think over the last 50 years, what are the values that I've lived my life by? What is really true of me? What is really deep within me? Come up with that list of say 8 things
mm,
and then start to do that inner work. And I think one thing I would love to mention here, Ivan, is that if folks want to buy, all this is available in this journal. So we built a
mm,
journal actually to make people do this. It's called the Ignite Life Journal. It asks you these deeper questions of who you are, what are your values, how do you put into this practice, and all of that available on Amazon. 180 pages of questions and introspections that one could enjoy doing. But do the inner work, because the inner work is going to allow you to have a blissful life, as Ivan and I have put it.
mhm. Yeah. I am going to put this the link for this book because I think it
Absolutely.
is quite appropriate that, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you have the opportunity to don't wait for later to have the right questions. Is something that doesn't come in one shot. It's not like if I devote 1 hour to think about the right questions, I'm going to find my path. It's iterative because we always fine tune the understanding of what we really are and the the perspective so that you separate with what you want to be between what you really are, because that is so difficult for us humans. We
Absolutely.
have an image of ourselves that sometimes is like, what the hell? Mm, Utkarsh, so it was really enlightening to go through all these questions and discuss the role of courage in and the role of fear in order to feel to fuel better leadership in organizations.
Mhm.
How can people reach you out if they have questions to have a chat, to just to have a discussion and understand a little bit more how to make it happen?
Absolutely. Ivan is an extremely talented gentleman, and he's put all the links in the show notes. But find me on LinkedIn. I think that's where I'm most active. So just put in my name. I'll not spell it for you. You'll see it on the screen or somewhere underneath this video. Just spell my name. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know you've reached out to me from this podcast, and happy to have a conversation and see how we can support each other.
It is really lovely to spend time with you. Really, I also recommend again for everybody to watch this TED Talk that Utkarsh has made. It's quite inspiring. Well, in fact, Utkarsh, I don't know if I really loved it because I felt close to the story, moving to another country, starting again. That is I felt it relatable,
Mm-hmm.
or there is, but I think that there is more to that. And even people who hasn't been doing this move from one country to the other can find it certainly
Yeah.
uh, inspiring in terms of how courage can drive you to go beyond your basic fears.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and there's so many stories that each one of us have, and fear is very innate to all of us. So I think folks will enjoy this TEDx talk, and hopefully the podcast was also of value. Look forward to more conversations, Ivan. It was just a joy to be here with you.
Thank you, Utkarsh. Have an excellent day.